Like I was able today to report very significant information on the terrorist attack in Baltimore, and I know people will say, well, it's not proven to be a terrorist attack yet. Our intelligence agencies already know it is. They can lie about it, they can cover it up, they can say whatever they want, but it was a terrorist attack, a cyber attack. And I'm able to do that because I have always protected my sources. That's a sacred covenant that I made. And that's why you see journalists sometimes, on rare occasions, going to prison rather than give up their sources, right? Why? Because you've made that sacred covenant, and it's one of those things that I will just never ever do. And I never thought about a psychiatrist in those terms. I never thought about a doctor in those terms. But when you find the good ones, that's who they are. And so they didn't need to target him, because the reason they targeted him was because they thought that he would give up his patient. They thought he would be corrupted. They thought he would take the money or whatever somebody offered him, but he wouldn't. And this man helped me understand how to really look at what is happening in our society right now. You know, if you want to say there are only two genders, now somehow we're boycotting anthropologist conferences, because anthropologists who are dealing with history, who are digging up ancient, human remains and saying, this was the first, man in Africa to live in Africa. Oh no, you can't say it's a man, because now you're leaving out all the other people that are, that are offended by gender. What this is called is not racism. It's mass delusion. They have created a mass delusion, and they're asking all of us to buy into it. And if you don't buy into it, they have 100 different weapons that they're going to use to bring you down. And I said this when I testified recently before Senator Johnson's committee in the Senate. I said, cancel culture is essentially how do you murder someone without actually killing them. If you're a doctor by trade, or you're a journalist, or you're a scientist, or you're, a geologist, and this is what you were born to do, this is what you better know, or this is what you rely on for your family. When you make somebody unemployable in their chosen profession, you don't just take away their means to support their family. You make them completely non-functional, right? I mean, it is the death. It's meant to be the death of you as you have known yourself. It is designed to do that. It is designed to kill you without actually murdering you. And then when you take it a step further, if you look at, for example, something like the 65 Project, and I'm going to talk more about this. The 65 Project was created to punish every attorney that dares to represent Donald Trump or take a case about election integrity, or something that those running this mass delusion don't want you to fight, right? So what do? They go after the bar associations in every state. They try to get you disbarred. They try to get you fired. And what did the man who was one of the architects of this project, David Brock, somebody may know his name by now, I've been yakking on about him for years, for more than a decade. David Brock, who founded Media Nights for America, who also was the brainchild behind the 65 Project and hand-selected the guy from Utah, Michael Teeter, who runs it. David Brock, who now runs an organization called Facts First USA. I'm going to come back to that so that you understand where that fits. This man said, I don't just want to make you unemployable. I want to make it impossible for you as an attorney, who dare take an election integrity case. I want to make it so you are like, you can't even get in your community. You're kicked out of your company, you're kicked out of your community, you're kicked out of everything. They want you, if you will not participate in the mass delusion, you are not allowed to function in society. We want you to not exist. And why is this important? Because if you go back to the psychiatrist, one of the things that he explained is that we are herd animals as human beings. What do we get in numbers? We get safety. We get security. It's not just weakness. There's a lot of people that will say to me, I wish more people would stand up. It's in our DNA to survive. We're built to survive. We're built to be herd animals. We're built to be sheep. I mean, they talk about it in the Bible. My sheep, Christ talks about my sheep follow me. He's not saying it to denigrate you. He's saying it because that's like who we are as human beings. So it's a very difficult thing to ask people to say, you know what, I'm going to blow up my whole career. I'm going to blow up my whole career. And I'm, as a journalist, this is a very subtle distinction, because what can I do as a 60 Minutes journalist? Well, I don't need to do that story, right? I'm just going to stay away from that story, or that story. That's not a good issue for me to take on. So I'm just not going to do it. That's the first step. That's when you self-censor. So we're just not going to talk about that identity, right? Well, when we have the family gets together, we're just not going to go there on Trump, whatever, any subject, right? We're not going to address it because we don't want to upset anything. So we created a society. We're creating a society here where we're all supposed to participate in this mass delusion. We all know, how can you have a sex change if sex is not real? I want to tell you, well, sex can be male, you can be female, and you can now be intersex. Okay, so when a baby's born, what doctor says, okay, we have an intersex baby here? No. And by the way, if you have a sex change, are you changing from male to intersex? No. No, you go from male to female, female to male. So, I mean, it's a ridiculous argument, and when you understand it's a delusion, and you're being asked to participate, and you don't have to participate, then it starts to set you free. And so, why does that matter? Because now when you start to look at it, as a journalist making that decision, you're not even aware of my choices. It's imperceptible, right? Because you watch me on 60 Minutes and I'm doing one great story one week after another, and why do I have to take on that issue? You don't really notice it. When do you notice it? You notice it when you go to your doctor, and he knows that it's not a vaccine. He knows that there's so much data coming out that it's killing people. He knows this. And yet he tells you to take it anyway. He advises you to take it, or he doesn't want to answer the question. So now that decision, now it has life and death consequences. As a journalist, it actually has life and death consequences too, but you can't see it. Why is that? Why and how is that relevant? Well, it's very hard to find something you can't see. We don't know about it a lot of the time until it's too late. Cyber attacks are unseen, aren't they? You don't see that virus infecting your computer. You don't see that ransomware come in. You don't know. If somebody came to your door and said, oh, I'd like to place a microphone in every room in your house. I'm going to be there when you're having sex with your wife, when you're on the toilet, when you're fighting with your whatever, right? I'm going to be there in your worst moments, your best moments. I'm never going to leave your side and say, oh, no, you're not. You ain't coming in. You set foot in my house. This is the state of Texas. I'm going to shoot you. Right? That's what you're going to do. So what did they do? Alexa, my phone, computer, smart television, dishwasher, the thermostat. It really doesn't matter. When they put smart in front of it, they didn't mean you. They didn't, right? No, they did not. So you think about it, when they introduced cigarettes and they had said, you know what, this is probably going to give you cancer and kill you, most people wouldn't have started smoking. Some would have, sure. But it would have been a very different decision. It's the same thing. It's the same baby soup. Okay. It's the same thing with technology. It's the same thing. They told you this is a surveillance device. And this is the beginning. We're going to use this to surveil you. We're going to use it to control you. We're going to use it. We're going to use it to take away your rights, your freedoms, your individual liberty, your privacy. We're slowly going to use it to dismantle the Constitution, right? And then we're going to use it to take over your world. So how are these things relevant? Well, the first thing I want you to do is give yourself a break if you're feeling guilty or you're feeling less because you haven't been someone who's grown up your whole life, in your whole career, and everything else. I'm not giving you a free pass. I'm I'm just saying to you, it's understandable. It's part of our human DNA. It's part of our survival instinct. I have 3 children. When my children look at me today and they say, and they talk about going to college, I don't want to tell them what for. Why? You want to be a doctor? Oh my God, are you ready? Because you're not going to be able to practice medicine. You're going to have to make political decisions that are not in the best interest of your patient. If you want to stay in practice, you're going to have to break the Hippocratic Oath. That thing, what motivated people to be a doctor? What made you want to do that? I mean, we have, Karen Young, where are you? David Young. And now we have doctors. They get up 4 o'clock in the morning and go to work 12-hour shifts in the ER. David one day came home from work and he intubated his last 4 patients. That's 4 people whose life he held in his hand. Every decision he made, every second mattered. And he does that day after day after day. In 30 years, he's never been sued once. Now you're going to ask that man, you're going to ask him to send his patients to their death, potentially, to give them advice that he doesn't know to be medically sound in order to save his skin? I just spent a few hours, I have spent years talking to a special forces operator. I spent a few hours on the phone with him last week. He would not take the vaccine, or the, whatever you want to call it, because it's not actually a vaccine. Vaccines prevent the spread of diseases, so it doesn't. It's not a vaccine. So, I'm not saying that to be controversial, though I'm sure there's people who have been vaccinated in this room. I'm saying this to you because this is a reality, okay? This guy went to his commander with his concerns about this. They were ideological, they were religious, they were health. I mean, he wrote the whole package. He wrote a 32-page objection why he didn't want to take the vaccine. His commander looked at him and said, I know it's true, but I've got kids and a wife to think about. So you as a commander sent some of your soldiers to their deaths because you didn't want to upset your wife and kids and your life. So it's an understandable instinct to protect your community, your business, your family, your financial interests, your well-being. All of that is understandable. But I just want you to know, because it's understandable, does not change the consequences. God spared me that decision. I do not stand before you today as a person who can say, I raised my hand, I volunteered to blow out my 60 Minutes career. I'm this noble person that had the courage you haven't shown. I'm not coming to you as that person. God spared me that decision. Because when I went down the Benghazi trail and tried reporting on that, I had no idea. I've never heard of David Brock in Media Matters for America. I didn't know that he had literally hundreds of employees, millions of dollars, and every single asset he has was devoted to bringing me down and murdering me without killing. I did not know that. I didn't know that the most powerful people in America wanted me to die and never report again. I didn't say, I'm going to face off these people. I had no idea. So my decisions were very, very different. But we are now in a moment. And, my husband said this to me years ago, and he was right. For years we were saying, we're like the Jews in the Second World War. Like, we're on the death march to the concentration camps. And some people aren't even talking about it. How did we get here? And then we kept marching, and some people started dying on the way. And it became more and more obvious we weren't getting out of this situation. And still people didn't want to talk about it. How many people said, I don't watch the news anymore. I just can't deal with it. I understand this. When you do that, you just took strategic ground and you surrendered it to the enemy. That's what you did. Whether you want to admit it or not, whether you can deal with it or not, that doesn't change the path that we're on. So you can get involved in your ranch, and you can get involved in your church, you can get involved in your grandkids, whatever it happens to be. Your life, you're a young person wanting to build a future, you can do all of that. But you have done nothing to alter the path. Nothing. How How many of you know the severity of the books that are in our schools in Fredericksburg, Texas? There's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people that don't. I can guarantee you, if I started to read a passage from one of those books right now, you might want to get up and leave. The graphic nature of the books that are in our schools. I'm not going to talk about it because Lindsay is here and she's one of my favorite little people in the whole world. And those precious years did not need to hear this. The whole point is to protect our children, not to expose them to it. Anyone who tells you this is a First Amendment issue is lying to you. We have a number of documents. 3 of those tell you everything you need to know. The 10 Commandments never changed. Right? Never changed. We know what's right, we know what's wrong. They're there. It's right there. If you've forgotten what's on there, you can check it out anytime. Why you still can, by the way? Because everything digital can be altered. So I would check out an old version, not a new one, if I were you. The 10 Commandments do not change. The Constitution won't change. And the Declaration of Independence. If you have those 3 documents, you have the answer to everything you need to know about this situation and what you can and cannot do about it. Right? And so, I want to go back to that person who wants to be a doctor, who dreams of being a doctor, or an attorney, or in a PR firm, or in a corporation. You realize now that the choices before all of those people, what does my son have to do to pass at school? He has to lie. Because when he's in English class, or when he was in St. Mary's in his economics class, and they were talking about alternative systems of economic organization like Marxism, do you know that they never taught those kids that Karl Marx did not believe in God? They didn't teach when they're teaching you that economic system, they don't say, by the way, the communist Marxists have been responsible for the death of millions of people. Mao killed millions, Stalin killed millions, Lenin killed millions. Do we teach the Nazi system of economic organization? No. Because somehow only Hitler's the bad guy. And I'm not giving Hitler a pass. I'm not suggesting you do. I'm suggesting you be honest about, so what we've done is we've taken a political system, like Marxism, which is a political system, it's not an economic doctrine. I learned it in college, it's an economic doctrine. But when you really study the whole picture of Marx, isolating the economic aspect of Marxism is profoundly dishonest. And what is it? Mass delusion. Mass delusion that's been perpetuated by Hollywood. Because you don't ever see movies. How often do we see movies about Mao and all the people he murdered and all the people that have died because of Marxism? We don't see it. We see amazing films about, like Schindler's List, right, and so on. These amazing films about the Nazis, but we hardly ever talk about how many people have been murdered by communism. The genocide of their own people that was carried out by those leaders and beyond. Because we haven't even talked about Pol Pot, Cambodia, and Vietnam, what the communists did in Vietnam and beyond, right? We don't talk about it because the people who control that information have information dominance. From Hollywood, that's not me, from Hollywood to Wall Street, to the East Coast newspapers and media, to magazines, to now cyber and digital, they control the flow of information, right? And so what have they gotten us to be? McCarthy, he was a nut. He was a lunatic. There were no communists in America. This was a dark period in our history. We can never return to that dark period, right? Where we targeted people for no reason. Well, if you go back and you listen to the McCarthy era hearings, you actually go back to that old footage, you will see the number 2 at the Pentagon sitting there on the floor saying, I am an avowed communist. I am a Marxist and I'll be a Marxist till the day I die. And one after another, you'll hear them in their own words stating it. We don't see movies about that. And then what you will notice, if you're paying attention, is to the left and to the right is a guy from the ACLU and a guy from the National Lawyers Guild defending them. And what did they do after the McCarthy era hearings? They dismantled the Committee on Internal Security Threats. Then they dismantled the subcommittee. I think it was the other way around. The subcommittee first, then they did the committee. And then what did they do? They went after the law. So why do they need to create laws about domestic violent extremism, domestic terrorism? They don't exist because of the McCarthy era. They got rid of them. And then they spent the next few decades getting you not to think about it, getting you to think it was all a lie. It was all mass, it was just craziness. And we don't want to go back to those days. These are the signs, these are the indicators that lead you to the truth. This is how God shows you the truth. These things don't change. You know it's true. You know how many movies you've seen about the Nazis, and you know what you've seen about communism that's out there. And we're doing it right here in our own schools, in our own state. And you know what they're doing in Texas? They're moving to fully digital education. So what I am able to do, because of the trajectory of my career and the way my mind works and the things that I've learned and what God has shown me over the years, I've learned how to connect these dots. So one of the things I want to do for you is connect these dots. Why and how do they matter? How do these things connect? Well, cyber is an invisible enemy. You can't read code. Let's face it. Can anyone in this room read computer code? Okay, two guys. So if he writes a program, can you read his program? Depends. Maybe, maybe not. What does that mean? Can any of our poll watchers read code? We got some of them. Right? Can any of our election officials read code? Okay, so we have paper ballots, don't we? Right. Take that ballot and put your mark on it. What are you doing with it after that? Someone lost the election when we did the hand count. You put it in a machine, spat it out on the other side. What came out? The honest answer is I have no idea. I don't know what came out because it goes a QR code. How'd that work out? That's reflected what you put on that paper? Do you know? You don't know. Okay, when they say they did an audit, how do they do an audit? What is a risk limiting audit? It means when you have, I don't know, 10,000 votes, you took maybe 100, maybe 150, maybe 200, maybe 300. That's it. She didn't go through all the votes. You didn't investigate all the systems. If I put a counterfeit ballot, like I signed a ballot in someone else's name, and I put that into the machine, and you count it. When you do the audit and you recount it, do you know? No. Do you get a different count? They tell you, all those ballots were all counted. They counted them, right? They didn't audit. They found nothing. Did they? You don't know what they're talking about. You don't know what they're talking about because those journalists that I referred to earlier who said, I'm going to text that, that's not good for my career. They didn't touch it. They stopped doing what was great. They stopped doing what was right. They stopped following things because they wanted to know the truth. And they started making political decisions. So then you get, well, okay, so now your lawyers are targeted. They can't take the cases. If they do, they get disbarred. And what happened to Rudy Giuliani when he represented Trump? He was fired from his own law firm. That was when Trump was the president. This is his first year as president. Rudy Giuliani was fired from his own law firm for taking the president of the United States as a client. What? What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Everybody's entitled to a defense, entitled to a fair investigation, you're entitled to a free and fair trial. This is not about Donald Trump. I really want to emphasize something here. For people who say it's about Trump, it was very clear to me from day one. When Hillary Clinton made that speech in 2016, when she talked about the basket of deplorables, who was she talking about? The American people who do not participate in the mass delusion. Okay, Grover Cleveland was the last president of the United States of America more than 130 years ago who was an incumbent who got more votes from every single demographic, his own base, within his own party, African Americans, independents, Hispanics, and somehow didn't win the presidency. Okay, so how does that happen? Not naturally. It doesn't happen naturally, because if it did, it wouldn't have been 136 years since the last time it happened. Right? So, why does that matter? It's not about one man, it's about the people. When I said in 2016, they're targeting the people, Bill Clinton made that statement, and then the media said, oh, there was an outrage, and people said, oh, she went too far, she didn't mean it. No, that is an information warfare operation, where they are introducing the idea because they want to normalize it. They want it to become part of the lexicon because they have a purpose for that idea. They don't want to be responsible for it, so she retracts and says, oh, they retract for her. But then they continue to pursue it. So they established how they were going to dismantle the American people, what the justification was going to be. If you won't participate in mass pollution, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be COVID, it could be gender, it could be the books in schools, it could be a rancher. You could be a rancher and know, oh wait, let me see, my cattle are not poisoning the earth. How about that? You could be someone, you could be a hippie from San Francisco who's been eating organic all your life, knowing that it's healthier and better for you. You could be a doctor at Johns Hopkins, like the ones I had lunch with when I was their guest speaker at their main events, and know that your immune system is the answer to everything. I was at an event at Johns Hopkins, I was a guest speaker more than 15 years ago, and they already knew that that within your immune system, you have the ability to combat everything. Now, can you access it? Is that the part of your immune system that prevails? Can you counter the negative aspects? All of those things were what they were harnessing. They now believe that your immune system can do more than chemotherapy and radiation to counter cancer. Now, they're not there yet at harnessing the full power of that. But that's what they actually believe. That's what the brilliant medical minds, the most brilliant medical minds in America, actually believe about health until COVID. And then suddenly the immune system wasn't good enough. Suddenly, Black Americans were historically low in vitamin D. Suddenly, they were experiencing high rates of COVID because of racism and not because they were low in vitamin D. Suddenly, the climate is changing because of CO2, which is critical to life on Earth, all forms of life. Do you realize that CO2 was made a poison under the Obama administration? No, you might, but probably most of us don't, because every single day, all around us, they are one after another changing the laws and systematically dismantling sanity and introducing mass pollution. They're legislating mass pollution. They are now legislating a climate crisis that does not actually exist. And I said to a friend of my son's, his parents are very liberal, and he's in this interesting world because at high it's everything, right? At top volume, everybody's screaming about everything, and there's nowhere to hide. And we were talking about the climate, and I said to him, "Cool, I just want you to think about this for a moment. You're now supposed to believe that the food that has kept humanity alive since the beginning of time is not bad for us. And it would be much better if instead of eating organic things grown in the ground or natural meat, you got a protein bar made in a factory out of chemicals." Yeah, not true. It's not true. It's not true. What did the oil industry do? I went down to Midland. Seth Keshel, you might know him. He's a big name in election integrity for captain of the U.S. Army. He loves to tell the story because he never met me before I did this event with him, and his mouth hit the floor. Because I was down in Midland, and I was introduced to some of the oil guys, and I said, "Excuse my friends, what have you guys been doing? You took a knee. You took a knee to the globalists and these evil people that are destroying our food supply and our energy supply. You took a knee, you took the money, you looked the other way, you kept your mouth shut. Remember what I said, what is the cost of your silence? Every single direction you look, we are paying the price for this. The teachers who kept quiet when they wore Antifa into the schools, and transgenderism, and so on, and so on, and so on. The teachers, the doctors, paramedics, the nurses, the people that stitch kids together, when the few that are rescued from trafficking and know what they do to them, what are their voices? You chose to be quiet. You made a decision. You made a decision that's understandable, but now you're going to have to live with it. Why does that matter to us right now in this moment? Because back to what I said at the beginning, this is an election that is unlike any other election in the history of this country. I have never said that before. I don't like the word unprecedented because it's used too much, right? It's used way too much. But this is an unprecedented election. And I'm not here to tell you that Donald Trump is the Messiah and you just get Donald Trump in office and everything's going to be okay. First of all, I don't even know that there's going to be an election, number one. Second of all, the people who stole the last election are now in power. Mother Teresa can come back with the dead and run in this election. I don't see how she's going to get elected. I just don't see it. Now, the good part of that is there's a lot I don't know. So that is by no means a definitive statement. But I'm just going to tell you, for those of you who are still sitting and thinking, I kind of like her, but I wish she would stop talking about the election because I don't actually believe it was stolen. So let me help you out. So how do we decide how many members of Congress we get? How many people represent us in Congress? So here you go, thing called a census. Do we count illegals in these census? Yes. Are you allowed to ask someone's immigration status on the census? No. We already know the answer. How does California have so many delegates? States. How do they increase their representation in Congress? Okay, so now the census is already being done, so that doesn't affect this election, right? Wrong. How? Because they created something called ERIC. I'm sure a lot of you know about it, right? The electronic registration system. So this is how, sometimes how smart these evil people are, because they realized, well, if we can get control of the voting records, the number of people, the people who are registered to vote, because everybody says, you get dead people on the rolls who are voting, you get people who move to another state, they're voting, you get all these kind of things. So we need to clean up the voter rolls. So we're going to introduce ERIC, and we're going to centralize it, but put it on computers, and we can clean up the voter rolls. How many people have ERIC removed from the voter rolls? None. Never. They've been around now for, 15, 20 years. Removed no one. Texas was a member of ERIC. More than 20, I think it was 32 states were members of ERIC. We are now no longer a member because after the 2020 election, people campaigned successfully to get you to understand what's really going on. Why does ERIC matter? Well, number one, you're centralizing the records. Centralization is how you reduce the work. It's all centralized. I don't have to go to every county and cheat. I just go to this place and cheat. It makes it a lot easier. That's one. How do I cheat? Well, if I never remove anybody from the voter rolls, why is that so important? Because you cannot have more votes than registered voters. Cannot have that. And by the time somebody's going through the courts and cleaning up the voter rolls and blah, 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 we know, normally, you claim victory on the night of the election. The concession speech, look at the date of every concession speech in a presidential election in history. I think there's only one or two that took place on the day afterwards until 2020. So by the time, that ship has sailed. By the time you're cleaning up the voter rolls after the fact, that ship has sailed. So you have people like Judicial Watch and others who are fighting to do that. But you have 400 organizations who are fighting against that. Voter suppression, right? So what else do they do with ERIC? ERIC, you are not allowed to question or ask the citizenship of anyone who's registered on those rolls. You cannot remove anybody from the rolls on the basis of citizenship. So even after you've done the census, If you are updating your rolls with people, like in the sanctuary states, full of people who are illegal, you are padding the voter rolls. So that, because you don't know how many people are going to show up on election day, you can figure it out pretty accurately. You can get close, but you don't really know. And this is what happened, right? They told themselves that Trump was such a demon that people weren't going to vote for him. And then what happened in 2020? They had a real problem, because in those critical states, the vote got away from them, and they had to shut down accounting, and they had to rework the algorithms, get the result they wanted, and then they had to backfill it with registered voters and votes. And that's why we needed time. I don't know how it's going to work this time, but the same people who did it last time are still in control. In fact, they have more power than they did last time. More. So you tell me, how do we break that system? Because nobody up to date, not one single judge, not one single courtroom, not one single county in this country has given access to a single voting machine. Even when it was ordered by a judge, they refused to comply and hand it over. And guess what? Just like the cyber attack in Baltimore, they can erase the footprint. You, as a computer programmer, can write anything you want. You can make it change the QR code, you can change one line, and you can have it change every 20th vote, or every 5th vote, or 5 votes in a row, or whatever it is that you happen to need. You can make it do exactly what you want. That's before. So now you're just talking about, they're already cheating. This election is already being stolen right now, today. And by the way, what was Google doing? When you were Googling something in a Democratic area in 2020, the opening page for Google was a reminder to go and vote. All the information and the links that you needed. They were doing that every single day. There's a guy called Dr. Robert Epstein. He's a Democrat, a hardcore Democrat. He voted for Hillary Clinton, hates Donald Trump with an undying passion. Dr. Robert Epstein lives in secret, in hiding, under maximum security. He cannot divulge his location. Literally, he has to hide his children because his own party wants him dead. Because he did a film called The Creepy Line, which was how Google stole the election in India, with search results where they show you on your computer when you log on. And what they figured out was, say, okay, I don't like candidate X. So when you Google candidate X's name, you don't get 20 negative articles, because they bring in anthropologists and behavioral scientists, and they bring in data specialists, and they study you. They study the voter. Every single person in this group, every single person on the planet has a digital twin. It's not maybe, it's not if, you have a digital twin. And every single thing you have ever done in the digital realm has been captured and built into that digital twin. I mean, I'm talking literally, if you've gone past the digital security camera that's tracking your location, that's been entered. We all have a digital twin. So when you say, well, I don't care that they send me an ad for this, and I don't care that they, so what? If I don't want to buy that, I don't have to. And I'm not doing anything wrong, so my privacy doesn't matter. It's not about selling you something. You are the product. You are what they're after. And behavioral manipulation is the purpose of that information. Your digital twin is valuable because you can be manipulated. How? Well, for example, you break up with your girlfriend, or you get into trouble at home, and now I've taken your phone away. Oh, how do we get this person to get back on their phone? We send them a message about that ex-girlfriend or that ex-boyfriend. We send them a notification of something that they posted on Snapchat or some other group we're in. Notifications are dead. Turn them off. They control you. Notifications decide what you look at, and when you look at, they lure you in. This is how they bring you in. Turn off every notification you have. Why did they put a clock on this? Why did they put an alarm on it? Because you won't turn it off when you're sleeping. They'll never turn it off, will you? You'll have it on all the time. Do your children have phones? If your children has a phone, or an iPad, or a laptop, or a computer, or a PlayStation, or an Xbox, you have traffickers in your child's bedroom. It's not maybe. It's 100% fact. You have invited traffickers into your child's life and into your home. And how do these things relate? What does that got to do with photo fraud and everything else? It is an unseen entry into your life and into your mind and into your central nervous system, into your brain, into how you function. We remember what it was like to wait for a letter in the mail. Our children. Lindsay, do you know what that's like? Yes? If you want to talk to one of your friends at school, do you guys have to fight with each other and home to see who can get on the landline? Yeah. What's a landline? This one is crazy. I stopped the margarita. There's drinking down. As Chris says, tequila makes your clothes come off. That's cool. This is a very, 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 very serious thing. I am not kidding you. There are so many apps that have been created. Your kids can watch a movie. You know what else? 100 other people can watch it at the same time. Traffickers will go into those apps, they'll sit there and watch a movie, they'll make contact, they will track you for a year, 2 years, 3 years, they will follow your child. That's all they exist to do. And now they have AI doing the groundwork for them. And why is that important? Well, they want to know, well, Lindsay, she's the youngest child. Oh, her sister's just around the boarding school, so she's the only one at home. What drives Lindsay? What makes her sad? What makes her happy? How do we get Lindsay? How do we figure out what makes her tick so that when we meet Lindsay, we can manipulate her? Like if we don't want you to get to the polls, we know that we've got a problem at a polling station. The vote is way out of hand. The lines are out of the door, and the vote is going to a candidate we don't want. But we can have a water main pipe burst. How? Because it's cyber. It's central control. They took all those analog systems, they just even put digital systems on top of it, didn't they? And that gives them what? It gives them control. And this is the part that we really need to confront. Just because they don't exercise that control doesn't mean they don't have the power. What would happen to you if they said, you're a bad boy, sorry, but you don't get to go on the internet anymore? No online banking, no online searching, no email, no internet, nothing. Because you've been a bad boy. What happens to you then? How many of your businesses go down? How many people have said to me, I know they traffic kids on Instagram, but my business depends on it. How many people say, well, I know Target pushes, transgender, this and that, but they have really nice furniture, I can find that somewhere else. How many of us make a deal with the devil 100 times a day? That's what we're doing, we're making a deal with the devil. And what technology does is it gives them absolute control over all of us. You can't apply for a job, you can't get a visa, you can't do this, you can't do that, I can't function without my phone. And they figured out a way to make you a brother, right? So look at Facebook, okay, Mark Zuckerberg, he's a moron, okay? He did not create Facebook. If you believe that at this point, you're also a moron. Okay, think about it. Facebook was created by DARPA. Why? It is a global surveillance system where what do they sell you? You create the product. They don't spend hours taking photographs. They don't send a photographer to your house and put nice pictures of your family. And by the way, who owns your image? Do you know? So what does that actually mean? It means that if I have my phone, I can book past Lindsay with an app, say right there. I have now done a 3D scan of that child, any child, anywhere. I can put that image on the internet. I can put an NFT on it. I now own that image. I create an avatar. I put it on the dark web. You pay me money. I give you a pair of Oculus glasses, and you can now rape that child as many times as you want. That's happening right now, as we speak. That is happening. You do not own your image. Why do you not own your image? Because you haven't asked. You haven't said, I want to own my image. You gave an unlimited, worldwide, perpetual copyright to Facebook, Instagram, Google, Snapchat, Microsoft, Dell, listen, if you do something on a computer, you gave it away. HIPAA? I'm sorry, what is HIPAA? What? Telehealth and HIPAA? No. Just because they don't use it doesn't mean they don't own it. It's just like I have people say to me all the time, I just got back from Mexico and had the best time, didn't see any cartels. That's great. They didn't want you to see them. But when they want to, it's over for you. Right? Because you didn't ask. You didn't stand up and you didn't say, you know what? I need to know what's on my child's device. I don't need to use Google Maps. I need to know what digital hygiene is. I need to know how to clear out all my cookies. And you didn't ask because nobody responsible for that ever told you the truth. Journalists stopped doing their jobs. Tech guys, I see those guys. I want to kick them in the nuts harder than the oil guys in there. Because they know. They know, and they've known from the beginning. They know that when you click onto Twitter or X for the very first time, and you say yes, you say, do you think that, meat is good for you? Yes. Okay, guess what? You just now clicked yes, and you didn't have to fine print and ask that question, and they now just did a digital troll through every single thing on your devices. And by the way, if you board into the family sharing plan and connect your devices and make it all easier, they just went through every single digital thing in your home, your dishwasher, it doesn't even matter. And they collected every single digital thing you've ever done. They downloaded that to your digital twin. Every single person sells your data onto somebody else. And they're buying it, and they're building that digital twin of every single one of us because it gives them absolute control. And then not only that, they created a system that logs into your central nervous system and changes how people function. What does it mean when they have our DNA? What does it mean when you evolve the water body, the scientific advisor to Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum says humans are now hackable animals? Joe. What does that mean? What does it mean that we're hackable? What they have done is created a system where we expect instant results, right? So when I said, you remember what it was like to wait for a letter or wait for your next favorite TV show, not be able to binge watch. What that has done is create an immediate effect. It's reprogramming our central nervous system to prepare us for what's coming. They don't say to you, they don't show you the technology that they really have. They give it to you, it's called the term called fractionalization. They give it to you in small increments so that you will accept it. The first thing was a brick phone, then it was a flip phone, then it was the first generation iPhone. What they have now is a phone that will wrap around your skin. It becomes a second skin, and it logs right into your central nervous system. And when you hit the buttons, a hologram pops up. Yeah. You might say, I'm not going to have that phone. I'm not going to buy it. You're not going to have a choice. I'm not going to sell anything else. You might say, I'm not going to buy an electric vehicle. What are you going to do? They've already just 3 days ago issued the worst and strongest emissions restrictions ever, standards ever in history. They made it so that no car company can afford to build a gas vehicle. First they won't build them, and they won't sell them, then there won't be any gas, then it'll be illegal for you to use them. Where are we headed? We're headed into a world, if these people continue with their agenda, we're headed into a world where there are no cattle. There are no ranches. Why don't they care that 1 billion acres went up in flames in Texas? Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. Not even talking about it in the media because they have information dominance and they are taking away your food. Now, in Europe, they're actually seizing farmland because what? They don't have a constitution. They don't have a Bill of Rights. And apparently a lot of them don't remember the 10 Commandments. They can't get away with that in America. They change their tactics and adapt. So, okay, you know a lot of this. When you look at all of this, does it make you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel like, what can I do about it? This is bigger than me. So I'm going back to that part. So for the first at least couple weeks, I've been thinking about what I was going to talk about here. And the last thing that I want to do is have you feel the way I felt, which is like, what do I prepare my children for? Right? Because slavery is death to me. I'm never going to surrender. I realize we are born free, We are born free, and that's how I'm going to die. Honestly, I've had a great life. I mean, I had a hard life in some ways, but who doesn't have a hard life? Everybody has a hard life. I've traveled all over the world. I've been honored by the Queen of England, and I did have and that was a good thing in those days, I will say that, before I read more about the royal family. However, the point is, I've sat on the streets with street kids in Angola. I've done with everyone, from presidents to, General Dinners to send his private helicopter to pick me up in the red zone in Baghdad and fly me to the palace to have dinner with me just to pick my brain. I've had an unbelievable life. And I'm tired. Right? So do I care about dying? I couldn't care less about dying. What is dying? It's nothing. What do I want to do? Live to be 150? Oh no, that's what they want. They want to live forever. They want to power their brain with a supercomputer. They want to use telepathic communications that are instant. That's why we're being retrained for instant communication. And they actually want to live forever. I don't get that. I like the seasons coming and going. Summer means something because I know winter's coming. You gotta just live forever. What does life mean? Right? And they've convinced us that the thing that is most precious to us, our human frailty, our humanity, that it's a weakness. They created superheroes. Why? So we would all want to be superheroes. I can give you bionic legs. You want them? Let me tell you what you can do with them. Oh wait, you're blind. It's okay, because I have a bionic eye, and you can have the gift of sight. Isn't that amazing? We can bring sight to all the blind people on earth. But what are they really, what's the cost? What's the price? Nobody asks the price. And what the price is very, very obvious. They have convinced us that the very thing that makes us most valuable, that human frailty, life and death, it's a gift from God, that it means nothing. That is to be feared. We should fear death. We should fear old age. We should fear all of it. We should do everything. I'm working on the old age part. I am fighting that with everything I got. It's not working out so well, but I am fighting it. But why do I say this? Because my ability to give my life for freedom and to inspire other people to fight for that would be walking in the footsteps of giants. Imagine the opportunity. I'm not looking to die. I have young children. I want to be there for them. I feel guilty for bringing them into this world with what they have to face. But look at what he gave us. So what can a Tesla never do? It will never ever make a last-minute decision to plow into a wall and spare the pregnant woman walking across the road. It will never have the ability to give its life for someone else, because it doesn't have life. And I'm going to take you right back to that psychiatrist from the beginning. He said the purpose of psychiatry is to help you find yourself again. Because people who have mental illnesses or mental difficulties have lost their connection to their true self. You've forgotten who you are, or you're so traumatized you never had the ability to know, or you never got there. So their job is to bring you back to your true self. And your true self is what? It is the truth. And what is the truth? I am the way, the truth, and the life. You come back to that true self. It's who you are as God created you. That's why it's so important for us not to believe. It's so important to take over the churches. Some of you may know this history. So before the Illuminati was founded, because it was founded a few months after America was founded in 1776 in a place called Bavaria. There were Illumins, right, who were pushing that way. And what happened? Well, they had pretty much, they were controlling most of the world. And they had this odd thing happen. They lost in America. And they hadn't taken it very seriously. Go back to the historic writing and you will see they were disturbed by this. So they founded and organized the Illuminati into a formal structure, which first job was to infiltrate the Masons, take over what was at the time the most powerful secret society in the world. And what did they do about America? They read the letters of the 13 colonies. They studied what happened to understand how they were blindsided. And when they did that, they discovered what? That the foundation of everything in America were the congregations and the churches. And they said, oh, that's not good. We got to infiltrate the churches and take that over like we're doing with the Masons. But it didn't work. So about 100 years later, they went where? They went to the seminaries. I have spoken to priests. One priest from Houston told me I was a secular humanist for my first 13 years as a pastor. I'm sorry, you didn't believe in God? What were you doing? Oh, we were doing pagan rituals inside the seminaries. And what have they been doing since the 1970s? Thanks to Carol Hicks Bolton, this is something I've been tracking. They have been changing the language and the words and the meaning of the prayers. They are now doing that digitally. They are already rewriting the Bible. So, why does that matter? We know people cheat in elections. We didn't think they could do a presidential one in the U.S., but we know they cheat. Politicians on both sides, Republican, Democrat, right? We know these things are happening, but what technology does is give them complete control. It takes pickpocketing and turns it into global credit card theft. When Hitler made his speeches in Germany, they did not echo in every corner of the world. If you control Facebook, Instagram, X, Google, etc., how many people do you meet, do you reach on the planet instantly? Billions. Billions. So what technology is doing is taking all of those capabilities and putting it on another level. Marxism and socialism has a role. It was created as a system of social control. That's all it is, a system of social control. If you see an ism, fascism, there were systems of social control. Who created it? It was Karl Marx, from a rich family or a poor family. How did he like the doctrine of Marxism? Do you know? He was hired. He was paid. Who paid him? It's a historical record. You can look it up. Don't take my word for it. He worked at 14 Downing Street for the Rothschilds. They paid him to devise a system of social control, and he did. But it's no different to fascism. If you look at it, that's just another system of social control. Do they believe in free markets? Either of them? No. Do they believe in God? No. Do they believe in individual liberty? No. I mean, you go down the list, they're identical. You have been deceived into believing that these wars, these things are on opposite ends and there's something to fight. It's just like Democrat and Republican. Doesn't mean that there aren't real differences, but you've been forced to focus on the differences that are distinctions with no real meaning, so that you will be blinded to the reality. And so I'm going to finish with this. It's what I want you to know. Technology has a critical role to play in this, because the defund the police movement only makes sense when you understand that the plan is to police you through your technology. You're not going to need police, because when you control everyone's every action and every minute of their day, and you dictate what they're allowed to think, what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to do, you now have a system of control that allows you to dispense with police, to dispense with courts. Guess what? Dispense with elections. Because they've already said predictive AI to save us the trouble of having elections. Because with predictive AI, I can look at your digital twin and I can say how you're going to vote. So we're going to email and text voting right next, and then we're going to no elections. You all know Lara said this could very easily be the last presidential election in the United States of America. That man said it. They put him on the stage at TED Talks. They put him on the stage at the World Economic Forum. Obama put him on his Christmas list of what books ought to read when he was president. These people are celebrated, they're lifted up. You tell the truth, you're punished, you're charged, you're thrown in jail, you're fired, you're canceled, you can't get through college. We teach our children to lie. We reward dishonesty and deceit and tyranny. That's where we are. And I would say this to you before I take questions. That is a bleak picture, and it's overwhelming. And when you look at it, you cannot see how you can fix it, right? So I realized last night, speaking to a former clandestine operative for the CIA, who's a very smart man, I realized why. Because the solution is not in our hands. You know that every day, you've got to give it to God. That doesn't mean that you get to lie in bed and you don't have to go to work and you don't have to be responsible and you don't have to do what you're supposed to do. It doesn't give you a free pass to do nothing. But what it means is that we are not in control. And that's what I realized again. When you try to control the outcome, when you try to think, somebody said to me today, there's no solutions. There are plenty of solutions. You can have an internet bill of rights. You can enforce antitrust legislation. Right? Imagine if you could do that. We don't like monopolies because we know what happens with monopoly power when we allow Microsoft and Google and Facebook to become monopolies. Why? Because we have no rules in the digital realm. Someone hacks into your security system, removes your firewall, good luck calling the local sheriff. What's that going to do for you? 10 years ago when I graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy, they told me we don't have enough agents in existence to deal on a daily basis with the cyber attacks that we get every single day. It is an invisible crime. Technology has a good side to it, we all know that, but unless we take control over it, we're going to lose the fight. But don't feel hopeless, because the reality is, you're just looking, when you have that feeling of being overwhelmed, you're just looking reality in the face. And that truth is very simple. We are not in control. So what you have to think about, really, is what is your relationship? What is your relationship with God? And I'm not talking about fake Christians, and I'm not pushing religion on you. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying to you, that flood is coming. And there's one ark. And you have to decide if you're going to be on the shore watching it go, taking in water, or you're going to be on board. And that's a personal decision. But that reality is with us. And if you didn't know it, you wouldn't be here to see it. So with that, I would really like to take your questions. Come on, Bobby. What do you got for me?
Trump wins, which I hope he does he go for 8 years? How does that work?
So hope is not a strategy. Wait. Hope, Bobby, is not a strategy. And what a lot of people are doing in this country right now is they're gambling. Right? And you're gambling. It's like I'm going to take everything I got and I'm going to put it on one thing. And if you lose, it's all gone. And that's not a slight on Trump. Trump is a life raft. The way you think about Trump is he's really a life raft. I mean, the President of the United States declassified documents and his own intelligence agencies refused to do what he said. The New York Times printed an editorial, an op-ed from a government worker in the White House who wrote that he was subverting the legally elected President of the United States, removing briefing papers from his desk, preventing him from getting information, preventing him from doing his job. And he said nothing. Nobody did a thing. So I will say to you that one of the most important things I ever learned as a journalist was to be conscious of what I don't know. Right? I want to think that there's, when you look at the breadth of this, it should be obvious to everybody that there's no easy button. Okay, there's no easy button. I remember when the war in Syria broke out. Remember in the beginning, the rebels fighting the Assad regime in Syria started small and got bigger and bigger, and we were talking about, will there be military intervention, will there not? Then you had the whole thing. Obama came up with this red line for chemical weapons. Remember that? Yeah. Oh, and then interestingly, just after he said that, what happened in Syria, in Damascus, just outside of Damascus, the day after UN weapons inspectors arrived in Damascus, there was a chemical attack in the suburbs. Isn't that interesting? Because what did Obama do about that? He did nothing. So what did that say to the world? And all the talk about military intervention in Syria, what happened to that? Went away. So then what did he do? I mean, he had the Spetsnaz, his special operations forces already on the ground, and he just flooded Latakia. He went in, he changed the time of the war because he knew no one was going to stop. So why does that happen? Because we still had good options in Syria at that point. And as it got worse and worse and worse, what happened to our good options? they got worse and worse and worse. And so I went to a lunch at the Army Navy Club in Arlington, Virginia with General Flynn. And I remember he spoke about, he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency at the time, and he said, we have no good options left in Syria. So that life raft, if by some miracle, Donald Trump were actually to get into power, I don't see how. If you look at it, how can they let that happen? Because Trump knows, there's a lot of things he doesn't seem to know, but he knows. And then at the end of that 4 or 5 year term, if those people are still around, he's a dead man. If he makes it that far, right? He's a dead man. So this time is different. He can't do what he did last time. You know, he can't afford to do that. And not only is he dead, but everyone around him that he cares about is dead, right? They're dead men walking if he doesn't deal with it. So that's what I mean by this is a life raft. But it's going to take, I mean, people will say all the time, well, you know, why did they act on this? So what are you going to do? The State Justice Department that's putting people in, still arresting people for exercising their First Amendment rights on January 6th. That's putting people in maximum security prison and solitary confinement for non-violent misdemeanor charges. That same Justice Department is going to go and arrest Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, James Clapper, John Brennan. I mean, I'm just getting started. Come on. That is not going to happen. So what is Trump going to do? I can tell you what Antifa is going to do because they've already told us. I can't tell you what Trump's going to do because I'm not in his head. I'm not part of his cabinet, his inner circle. I don't talk to him. I've never met the guy. So I'm not the one to tell you what he's going to do. I can tell you if he doesn't deal with this, he's a dead man walking. So I think he's smart enough. He's obviously smart enough to know that. But it's going to take more than Trump. It's going to take every single one of us. The job is not going to be done. There's a lot of people that think, oh, you just get Trump in power in November, and then I can go back to my life, and I can relax. When they said, when COVID started, this is a new normal, and we're never going back, didn't you think that was odd? I mean, supposedly we had we had a bad virus, but they said 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then we'll go back, right? Why were they so unified in this message that there's no going back? Because if you listen to what they're saying, we are on the verge of the 4th Industrial Revolution. And in this revolution, it's not a product, it's not a machine that's going to revolutionize how we do things. We are the product now. We are the product. We have ushered in the era of mass surveillance with COVID because people said, oh, a virus? I could die? Sure. Kill the rights? Burn it. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to travel. That's dangerous. I can wear 4 masks, stage 3. It's okay. You know, the doctors knew that I wasn't doing anything. You know, look at what people are willing to do. You say you won't eat insects. What about when there's no cattle and there's no food? Will you eat them then? You say you won't go. What are you willing to do to stay alive? Me, I know. If it weren't for my children, it would be an absolutely simple decision. But with my children, that's the complicating factor for me. Because I don't want to abandon them. But for the rest of it, I don't care. And so that's the thing, is the vigilance that's required of you now to stay across what's happening in your community, to stay across what's happening in your schools, what's happening on your ranches, at your grocery stores, on your critical infrastructure. I didn't even talk about that. Yeah, I will if you want me to. But the vigilance that's required, the courage that is required, that's not going away even if Trump somehow gets into the White House. It's not going away because every single thing he does, Antifa has already said. So if you follow Millie Weaver, I mean, she's had a lot of criticism, but in the 2020 election leading up to that, Millie Weaver contacted me for help, and she had a video that she shared with me, which was a huge meeting of what you call the affinity groups. So one thing is very obvious, I'm sure to all of you, is that the left is very well organized. And what they have done is create a movement. There's a blueprint for it. It's written by an organization called Momentum. So it's called Momentum for Change. Remember Obama's slogan, we're going to change America, right? So if you look at Momentum, they have codified how you create a movement. If you then look at the Sunrise Movement, they have codified how you put that into the schools. If you then look at, the collectives, mutual collectives, those are the Marxist organizations that have codified how you implement that in your communities. All of this is very organized. Your legal groups at the National Oil Field and the ACLU, they're the ones who were defending the Marxists in the McCarthy era. They're still doing it today, providing free legal services for Antifa and so on. The same organizations, the same people, but they proliferated. So these affinity groups are meeting. It included, dozens and dozens and dozens of serving government employees inside the Trump administration. And they discussed on this Zoom meeting how they were going to make America ungovernable if Trump won the election. How they would slow anything, any policies that were handed down, any executive orders, how they would not implement them. They literally had the guy in charge, actually one of those guys, head of the Sunrise Group, was coordinating the meeting, running it. He said, we need people who are willing to commit violence. This is not a time for people, isn't that kind of argument that people don't believe in guns? Right? So and they can get away with it because they have information documents, nobody ever does anything about it. We just accept it. What do you say? It's too much, I'm not going to watch anymore. I'm not going to read the paper anymore because it makes me too upset. I'm just going to go about my normal life. I've got this I can affect, this little patch, and I'm just going to worry about that. I'm sorry, but that ship is sailed. You're buying into the mass delusion. Part of the mass delusion is that by removing yourself, there are no consequences, and this train is stopping. This train is not stopping. I can tell you what an intelligence operative told me today. He said, we're in a race car, and the race has failed, and we're just gaining speed. That's where we are right now. And so it's incumbent upon every single one of us to, one, pay attention, to know the law. How many people, including me, by the way, before I spent 2 years working on election integrity, when you open to a polling station, do you know your rights? Do you know that every polling station keeps a log? Do you know that you as a citizen have a right to those logs? And if they're told this machine ran out of paper, this machine I couldn't get about it doesn't matter. They have the logbook. They're not covered by election records acts. Those are covered by local county acts. They can destroy them whenever they want to, depending on what the rules are in that county. But if you get those records, you can show the disaster that the machines are, how many problems they have. You just never hear about it. So if you know your rights, if you're a poll watcher, and they're putting up pizza boxes in the window of the polling station in Atlanta, Georgia, what the hell are you doing? The RNC is not coming to save you. No. They're not coming to save you. They're not. Because the establishment in both parties likes the old system, and they want to go back to it. They got rich through it, maybe they had a good life, maybe they had influence, maybe they had their own company, maybe they had power in their community, it doesn't matter. They want it back. The America First, whatever you want to call it, the people's movements that want to change how things were done because they don't like it. They don't like you. And the Republicans don't like you any more than the Democrats don't like you. You got more, I hate to tell you, you got more in common with Bernie Sanders supporters than you do with the RNC. That's the reality. And there are people in this town, in the Republican Party, who would rather vote for a Democrat than vote for an America First candidate. In fact, they despise the people. What has happened to us is that we realized that when they said, this is a government for the people, of the people, and by the people, they didn't mean it. We said it, but they didn't mean it. Because when you exercised your rights and chose your leader in an overwhelming majority, he said, oh, no, that was terrible. We can't have that. So we're going to figure out how to break it all down and bring you in the process. And they have strategy that they rolled out in 2016, before Trump even raised his hand and was sworn in. They were already handing out that strategy for donors. The information arm of it is run by David Brock at Media Matters. That has now developed into Facts First USA, and what their mission is to make sure that everything we talk about in this room never reaches the other side of the aisle. That you stay in what is called in technology and information warfare terms a feedback loop. Stay in your feedback loop. Have you ever noticed that you keep seeing the same names come up in your feed on Facebook or on X? because you're in a feedback loop. They know that naturally and instinctively, we don't want to hear people that we don't agree with. It makes us mad. It's unsettling. We are being told to fear conflict. We don't want conflict when our kids come home from college for Thanksgiving. So we're going to say, we're going to keep it nice at the dinner table. We're going to stop teaching our children that you can disagree. I told my son the other night, I said, I don't have to agree with you. Like, we can actually disagree, and it doesn't mean I'm displeased with you. It's okay. Like, disagreement is part of normal human interaction, but they are slowly isolating us from each other. You know that if you get a bunch of kids around a table, they're all going to be on their phones. Right there in person, they're going to talk to each other. They're literally living in a world that doesn't actually exist. It doesn't actually exist, but it's more important to them than what's happening right in front of them, because we allow that. We allow that to happen. So, the thing is, Bobby, I can't say to you Trump's going to be in for 2 terms, because that's illegal under the Constitution. Some people believe he's still the president. You couldn't even be running if that were the case. But what I can tell you is that Trump is not going to be able to do anything if the people don't stand up. Because the only thing that moves the needle, the reason January 6th was so critical, is that the judges are corrupt, or the judges are weak, or the judges are afraid of the same things you're afraid of. I've been known to be a little blunt about Congress. They call, I had a bunch of Republicans, like 40 of them asked me to come up and speak to them about Afghanistan during the withdrawal. And when I realized when I spoke to them, a lot of them came back, but when I realized when I spoke to them, they were talking about Lloyd Austin being appointed as defense secretary. And one of them, Congressman Scott Perry, a very brave man, only one in that room of Republicans, of 40 Republican congressmen, voted no to Lloyd Austin's confirmation. And you know why? Because they believed that Lloyd Austin would be a great defense secretary? No. They told me because they could not afford to be accused of racism. And the reason they can't afford it is because when they are accused of racism, what do you do? Nothing. You do nothing. You stay quiet. Because if I stay quiet, maybe they won't come for me. But they will come for you. What you are seeing now is a systematic breakdown of everything that you believe in and that you love, including your own freedom. Right? So what does your life matter at this point? Especially if you're older. Your life has been lived. What matters is the lives that are coming, right? That's what really matters to us. Do you have children? How old are they? And do they want to have kids? What happens to your 30-year-olds, your 25-year-olds, your 21-year-olds? What they have planned for us is a system where you are geographically isolated. Do you know that in Europe they just canceled short-haul flights in 3 countries? It's bad for the climate. Yeah, that's the beginning of the eradication of the global airline industry. When I told my assistant to Africa that a few years ago, she thought I was that crazy. Okay? And now look what they're doing. They are slowly getting rid of your freedom of movement. There will be no private ownership of land. There will be no private ownership of cars. There will be a public transportation system that is controlled by technology that frankly takes us back 100 years. Because I got a battery charging station. What? No, they're not planning on putting battery charging stations everywhere. They're planning on you not traveling. How do you know? Because they created something called 15-minute cities, where they say that everything you need should be within 15 minutes on your road. There's no reason for you to go outside of it. And those of you who think, well, you know what? I have my own cows. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to grow my own veggies. Guess what they're doing now? EPA is coming to your door and saying, you who have been selling, just did this in Tennessee this week, selling meat to your neighbors for the last 7 years, you don't have a proper water system in order to be carrying out commercial business. They shut it down. Take your cattle, shut your business down. They're not going to let you live on your little plot of land in Texas doing whatever the hell you want. It's not going to happen. You're not getting away from this. I was just talking to General Flynn, 2 nights ago. He said to me, because I said, you always say hope is not a strategy. And I realized I'm hoping that we get that life raft. Because if we don't, I know it's over. And he said, I know, I think about this a lot. And he said, you know, I think about, because I said, what am I preparing my kids for? Death. Slavery and death. You can't speak. You can't be free. You can't function. You can't go within outside of 15 minutes of your home. You can't do any of these things. I said, that's not living. And he said, you know, I've thought about that, like, what do I do? Because, you know, he said, after November, like, he doesn't believe there's ever going to be, he said to me again, I don't think there's going to be an election, but I don't know. He said, but after this one, it's highly unlikely there'll ever be another election again if it ain't Trump. And who gets it, who manages somehow to get it. Not because he won't get the votes, but because they won't allow it, right? So he said to me, where am I going to go? Because with digital surveillance, it's global. They can see 25,000 feet under the earth with technology. 25,000 feet under the earth. Where are you going to hide? There isn't a mountain high enough. There isn't an ocean deep enough. There isn't an island remote enough. It doesn't exist. Technology allows them to see into every single aspect of your life and your brain and everything else. In Canada, they just made thought crime a crime. Thought crimes a crime. So if you step aside and allow these people to prevail, if you don't speak up, if you're thinking, well, I don't want to be another January 6er, so I'm not going to go and support them on the border. Good luck. Because what's coming is much worse than what is. You might make your peace with it and say, well, I can't stop them putting those books in the schools. They're not going to stop with the books in the schools. And one thing, how many people really understand what transgender surgery is? Okay, so do you realize that they're boob jobs on guys? They're giving them hormones so they grow breasts. And then they're giving them medication, pills that make them lactate. I mean, they're turning you into a medical slave for life. I mean, the hormone effects, the chemical effects, these people's lives are completely and utterly destroyed. There's no sex life for any of these people once they have this surgery. It's done. They're taking skin out of your arm and putting a flap between your legs so you can pretend you're a boy. Talk about mass delusion. They're now transplanting wombs into men's bodies. This is already happening. And guess who one of the biggest funders in America is of this? The Prince the governor of Illinois. The governor of Illinois, his family has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into this. They're building transgender hospital facilities. Entire hospitals that are just going to do this. Why? Because transgenderism is preparation for transhumanism. And when you get that bionic eye and you're a blind person who can see again, what do you see? Is that a feed from someone's computer? Or is it actually the real world? You have no idea. And when they connect your brain, so they say that this, Ray Kurzweil says, the co-founder of Google, he stands up at his TED Talk and in Davos, and he says, this is the brain of the world, right? Because you're connected to the brain, every brain, every scientist, everything that's ever been done in the world, you can connect to it through here. But isn't it a pain that you have to worry about where's my phone? Wouldn't it be so much better if this was just a second skin? You didn't have to worry about it. Oh, then after the second skin, wouldn't it be so much better if we just connect your brain to the hive mind? You know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to do it because your brain, when you think to speak, you're not going to operate fast enough to function in the society that they're creating. So you're either going to opt in, or there is no life for you. And if you want to know how important that digital twin is, take a look at where they're storing all your information. It's not in the clouds. I got news. It just evaporates. No. It's stored at a lock and key in a physical server that is more secure than Fort Knox because it's that valuable. It's the most valuable thing in the world. So probably that wasn't exactly a direct answer to your question. Because the truth is, I have no idea if Trump's going to get in office or if he's going to stay there. It's a life raft. That's what I didn't think about. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Hypothetically, if Trump does get elected, what are the chances of him being a cabinet that is actually going to be standing behind him, which was his big problem in the first vote?
it's a very big problem, it's a very important question. Because Trump's not even picking people now who he's endorsing, those are all good people. What's happened is that the establishment of the party controls what? Typically they control the party. I mean, there's been a few incidences like Christina Kalamo in Michigan, where you had an America First candidate elected the head of the GOP. But what has happened to her is that the establishment controls what? The money. They control the money. So you look at South Carolina, you look at Arizona, you look at Michigan, I mean, you go on and on and on, Pennsylvania. What have they done? They have, wherever you've had America First candidates making roads, they've held back the money. So now, Trump is, for example, endorsing some horrible people because if that establishment is done by the and they're saying you're not going to win the election. So you got to support this person. And that's upsetting a lot of American First candidates because I spent the last 4 years getting my insurance, making sacrifices to stand up for you, and now you're not standing by us. You're supporting the worst guy in this community. You're supporting the same people that stole the election from you in the GOP in Michigan in 2020. You're supporting them. How does this work? And believe me, I hear from them, what? These people are upset, and rightly so. But I have to say, it doesn't, I don't know everything. Is there some kind of, economy, business as usual? But I said, we're at the gates of Auschwitz. They're burning people in the ovens. The smoke is rising into the air, and they're saying it's climate change. And you're saying it's maybe. There's people today in the tree saying that what happened in Baltimore doesn't matter. It is the second busiest hazardous material corridor for the United States of America. That connects the Eastern Shore from north to south. Right? You just severed that on the Mason-Dixon line. You just cut the Eastern Shore in half. What are hazardous materials? Refined fuel, diesel, propane gas, chemicals, nitrogen, flammable materials, oversized cargo that can't fit in the tunnels. And it doesn't matter? Seriously? It doesn't matter? So you don't need fuel then on the Eastern Shore. Is that right? Oh wait, you hit a bridge. They want you to believe it's an accident, right? But you hit a bridge. That bridge, that's a mile long. The two outer pylons are the anchors of that bridge. Any structural engineer can tell you. They're thicker, they're stronger than any other part of the bridge. They're in the shell of the water. You take out either one of those on either end, and you take out the structural integrity of the bridge, you collapse 50% of the span. That's just what you do on the surface. What have you now done to the structural integrity of the concrete structure underneath? They don't know, but they know it's bad. Because that was the single greatest vulnerability in that bridge. So you think it's an accident? That somebody just ran out of fuel, or I don't know, went to slip the wheel, or whatever the bullshit they're going to come up with. Right? You think that just happened? No, it didn't just happen. Right? It didn't just happen, we know that, because they knew the exact point of the bridge to target. Because I've spoken to a guy who was standing on that bridge in the 1970s when they opened it, who was one of the original founders of Baltimore SWAT, who knew when he looked at the security camera footage from 7 minutes away, when he saw that ship and he saw that bridge, he said, it's not in the channel. And if it's not in the channel, there isn't enough room to make that turn. So that ship was already under the control of someone else. How did they do that? It's called spoofing in the cyber world. They create a fake GPS signal, they hide the real one, they cover their tracks, they spoof it from somewhere that they mask, and they take control of that vehicle, and they're now in charge. And by the way, maybe that's how Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law backed her Tesla into a pond. Yeah, maybe because somebody else hacked the system. I hate to tell you this, but the average hacker in his mother's basement, sitting in his underwear with autism. Okay, I'm not kidding you. It's not even hard. It took a handful of people and maybe $250 million to do an attack like that. And it didn't cost. That bridge will probably never be rebuilt. Underneath the water is a logistical nightmare that you cannot even imagine. It has to be taken apart, it has to be assessed. They will probably build a new bridge. You have now taken out the second busiest strategic corridor of the United States of America for probably the next 5 years. And it's not just the I-95 corridor that runs across the bridge, it's the sea corridor that runs underneath. You close down the port, none of those containers can dock. Where are they gonna go? You have all those ships out of the sea that will come in and do Baltimore that supplies Eastern Shore water, fossil fuels. Where are they gonna go? They have to be rerouted. They gotta go on I-95, they gotta go around Baltimore now. You know why they can't go in the tunnel? They can't go in the tunnel because it's too dangerous. You can't put it in the tunnel. So what are you gonna do? You gotta apply for a permit. They built that bridge because they couldn't send the hazardous materials through the tunnel. So to do it now, you gotta go get a permit, it's gonna take time, it's gonna take money. Now what do you have to do? You have to get it escorted, you have to shut down the highway. That is a 5-lane highway, it's the second busiest highway in the United States of America. You're gonna shut that down, you're gonna do it at night. So now you can only move this cargo at night. So the catastrophic economic consequences of what happened today are on the scale of 9/11. But because it's cyber, you don't see it. They stole the 2020 election. That was on the scale of 9/11, wasn't it? Look at what they were able to do. Look, they are now, did you see what they pushed through in that omnibus spending bill that they pushed through in the middle of the night? Tracking your cattle. Tracking your cattle. They have now passed into law the right to track every single cow in America. Is it because they want to make sure that your cow is doing okay? No, we know that, okay? So there are literally people that still say that. Well, why don't you wait to see what the media do their job and find out about it? The media is not going to do their job. You can't count on the media to do their job. You can't count on people in office. You can't even count, unless you know your adults or you know who you're talking to, you can't count on any of them to do what they need to do. You need to put your nose into your school, know who your teachers are, you need to put your nose in your kids' business and find out who they're talking to online and what they're looking at. You need to engage and have conversations. Don't be afraid of conflict. Don't be afraid to confront these things. Because you know, I'm reminded of Ecclesiastes, and somebody can correct me because I'll mess it up, I know I will. What has been will always be. Right? And there is nothing, I know there's a line in between the minutes, and there's nothing new under the sun. What is it, Karen, under the sun? I know, and there is nothing new under the sun. But there's a line in between. It's like what has been will always be, and what will be, you know, it is something else. And then there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun here. That's why I started out with the 10 Commandments and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Because those things, those principles remain truth. Right? People seek information. If you've got stage 3 cancer, do you want your doctor to lie to you and tell you it's stage 1? No, you don't want the truth, but you'd rather deal with that. That's where we are. That's literally where we are. So I hope that answers your question. Anybody else? And by the way, I won't be offended. Anyone who wants to leave, you can leave, but I'll be here as long as you need me.
Yeah. What's the current status of Catherine Herridge and her situation?
So when I hear CBS, they on her vomit, so I don't know. To be honest with you, it really does make me sick to my stomach. Because you gotta remember, I mean, I was gang raped, sodomized, and beaten almost to death by these people. I lay dying in the square, in Tahrir Square in Egypt. I've been a journalist for more than 35 years. I gave 16 years of my life to that company. I lived in Iraq for 5 years at the height of the violence. I was 4 months pregnant. I waded through sewage up to here. I did covert entries into Taliban held villages in sewage, literally up to here, spending 5.5 hours like that when I was 4 months pregnant with my daughter. I was on operations in the mountains against Al Qaeda when I was 9.5 months pregnant with my son. I mean, I'm like that psychiatrist. You know, this is, I was born to be a journalist. This has been my whole life. And I've always been this way. I started writing for a newspaper when I was 17 years old. I was still in high school. I was sneaking into the South African townships when they were hacking people with machetes and setting them on fire, putting a tire on them, killing them decades. When nobody would let a little white girl go into the townships and do that. I spent my Saturday nights. I worked for a Sunday newspaper. I would take we had to wait for the first edition to come out on the presses. And then my job, because all the professional journalists, they all wanted to go home to their families. So I said, I'll do it. I wanted to learn. So I stayed on Saturday night. I waited for the first edition of the presses, and then I would go to the morgue. This is year round. You had to go to the morgue, the fire station, the hospitals, and the police station. and you had to give people copies of the paper. Why? Because we were building networks and relationships. It was 1988. We didn't have the internet in those days. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have pages and stuff. We didn't even get television until 1979. Okay? So what was I doing? I was trying to understand what was happening in my country at that time, because the South African government we knew was lying to us. And I couldn't go to all those areas. They didn't want little white girls going to get burned and chopped up in the townships and being responsible for that. So I made friends with the police at the fire station, the guy at the morgue. I persuaded the guy at the morgue. He didn't tell me how many bodies, because they didn't want us to know how many people were dying. And so he would tell me, and then he became friends, and then I would say, well, most of them shot. How did they die? What do you want to see? Yeah, I want to see. So then I would go and count the bodies myself. Because then I knew when they were lying. And that's never changed. It will never change. First-hand information for me is the best. Seeing it with your own eyes, but building enough of knowledge and understanding that you know what you're seeing. And because they love that, right? Don't believe your lying eyes now. They want to tell you what you're really looking at. What you're looking at isn't real. But you know in your heart too. That's why you have to know those 3 documents, because they keep you true. So when I hear about CBS and Catherine Herridge, first of all, okay, so I'm not going to be not honest. So I'll tell you, Catherine Herridge isn't the nicest person. I don't really like her. I worked with her at ABC News 30 years ago, and she was a bitch to me, like most of the people at ABC News. So I don't really feel a lot of personal sympathy for her. But when I separate the personal side of it, and I look at the principle, there's a pattern here. What happened to Catherine Herridge? She was doing things at Fox News that other reporters were not doing. What did they need to do? They needed to shut her down. How did they shut her down? They give the big network job. We're going to promote her. Take her to CBS News. Your middle button. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, April. So that's a runaway train right there. Stand by. This will be the next fight, right after that. Okay.
It's going to get a little spicy in here. Come on.
That's so sweet, right? The big picture. See what happened right there? God got me. He got me right there. So, okay, but my job is I got to separate the personal side of it from the principle, because, they say, they seized her devices. It's a corporation, people. When they fire you, they take your shit. That's what they do. Every corporation in America. It's not news. They want you to be aghast. Oh my goodness. What do you think they did to me when my big Gaza thing was happening? They put security professionals working on CBS payroll to go to my office and comb through my computer and my drawers and everything. They looked at every single thing they could find to hold on me. They found nothing, because there wasn't anything. So what did they do to shower activism? They spied on her computers. Catherine Herridge is not the first CBS News victim. So on the one hand, I have this sort of conflict, because I don't really feel much sympathy for her. And also, I feel like when you know the truth, Catherine was doing something very important, because she was still in the CBS realm. And so inside that realm, or inside Fox News, she was pushing the limits of what they were willing to show. But for crying in a bucket, people, the whole truth is much bigger. I mean, this is baby steps. What Catherine Herridge was doing was baby steps. And a lot of the time, when you use someone like that to take baby steps, you use it so that nobody gets to take bigger steps. So there's a frustration there on a professional level for me, because it really wasn't that groundbreaking. Now, in another sense, it was, because she's outside of that feedback loop on the right? And she's able to reach other people, so that's really important. Plus, I already know they're assholes at CBS. So I don't expect anything more from them. I'm not one of those people I don't understand. When someone is slitting your throat, why do you keep turning to them and asking their opinion? That's what we're doing here. I mean, journalists is it in dispute today that Trump's campaign was spied on? No. It's not even in dispute from the intel agencies. And who apologized to Trump for reporting that he was lying about that?
No one.
Who retracted their stories?
No one.
How many many stories that CBS do about that? A lot. And that's just one thing. That's one thing. What about all the stories that said that Mike Flynn didn't know that he was just an intel sergeant, like a low-level intel sergeant, officer in the U.S. military. He didn't know how to call up the National Guard, and the New York Times printed that. And CBS then put it out, in spite of the fact that I wrote a detailed memo for the entire company, showing that the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency knows more about these things than anyone else in the country. He's the top spy for crying in a bucket. And what did they do with that? They put it in the trash. They didn't care. So I learned, I learned the hard way 15 years ago. I don't expect anything more from these people. I don't look to the New York Times for verification and validation. I couldn't care less, because they're worthless. And even worse than worthless, they are a big part of the problem. So I don't care. But if you look at the principles of what are they saying? Catherine Herridge was, well, I can't remember what she was reporting on, but it was important. Something, I don't know. Anyway, they obviously didn't want that out. They had the excuse because they did mass layoffs at the time. I love the outrage over her departure, because it would have been great to have that when I left. But at the same time, I don't really, I mean, when I know what the truth is, I don't really see that there's not an awful lot of significance in a lot of what she was doing. She was staying neatly behind the lines 80% of the time. But it is a shame, and she probably didn't deserve it. There's no doubt that she didn't deserve it, and doesn't speak. I mean, I just don't know why people. We're in the middle of a censorship industrial complex that rivals the defense industrial complex. If you haven't read Matt Taibbi and Michael Shellenberger and the Twitter files, you got to go and look at it. If you're not following Missouri versus Biden and looking at the censorship over COVID, you need to follow it. If you're not following Murphy versus Biden and the other First Amendment cases at the Supreme Court, I'm on the board of America's Future. That's a foundation that is owned, General Flynn is the chairman, and his sister Mary runs it. America's Future submits amicus briefs. Okay, that's one of the big things that we do. We've had many of them accepted by the Supreme Court. One of them is the one in support of the state of Texas's right to defend its own borders. Another is Missouri versus Biden. Another one is the one related to the 1512 felony charge that January 6 defendants have been stacked with. That is really a document charge that's got nothing to do with obstruction of Congress, and is probably going to be reversed by the Supreme Court. So if you want to know about some of these critical legal issues and how those are being fought and won, because we've been very successful with the amicus briefs, you can go online to America's Future and you can look at a lot of those. But the idea that you have a voice today on the internet is a joke, because your voice can be turned off anytime. My voice can be turned off anytime they want. Anytime, because they have absolute control. They control every cable, every tower, every computer, every software program. They control it all, and they control it by remote. I mean, who has Wi-Fi at home? Okay, did you build that system? No. Oh, okay, well then you don't control it. It can be turned off by anyone, anytime they want. Anytime they want, and you can do nothing about it. Who are you gonna call? Good luck. Right? At least when you've got a human being on the end of the phone, you can hold them accountable for their decisions. You've now got AI making those decisions. Who are you going to hold accountable? That's what they want you to think. There's no one there. It's just a machine. But behind every machine, behind every algorithm, behind every program, there's a person. So if you go onto ChatGPT, which is the AI search feature, and they did this, and you ask, what does a pope look like? They show you a black female. Sorry, never been a black female pope in history. That's not what a pope looks like. So what does that go back to? And there's a document that was leaked from Google more than 10 years ago, where they were basically instructing the company and restructuring it to deliver the world we believe we should be living in. Not the search results should reflect the world as it should be, not as it is. And that's what they've been systematically doing. And the biggest part of that is censorship. And so the Catherine Herridge case is really about censorship. And so it's a wake-up call for all of us to realize that if you don't stand up to that censorship and demand your voice and start moving to alternative platforms and getting off the merry-go-round, it's done. You're slitting your own throat. Any other questions? Yes. So you sort of been waiting it on.
Okay, who owns the Federal Reserve?
The Rothschilds? I don't know. Well, you know, I mean, obviously what you're referring to and drawing attention to is that the Federal Reserve is not a federal agency. The worst thing about the Federal Reserve is that they print money and they charge us for it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's another con, right? That's a big con, and it's a big problem because, as you can see by the fact, do you ever hear anyone talking about BRICS from the administration? Do you ever see Jerome Powell and Federal Reserve talking about BRICS? BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, right, South Africa, which is now become by Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and now represents 60 to 70% of the world's population that is challenging the petrodollar. I mean, right now, as we speak, countries are paying for fuel in their own currencies and not in the dollar anymore. And if you think that doesn't matter because nobody's telling you it matters, or no one's talking about it or treating it seriously, I mean, it's very obvious that we're not going to accept insects unless there's no food. We're not going to accept the central bank digital currency that takes away our liberty and our freedom and our purchasing power and our privacy and our independence and every right we have unless we have no choice. So these big changes need catastrophic events in order to get people to accept them. So the point of the Federal Reserve is that basically you have an agency that is not an agency. It was privately set up, privately owned. It's run like a government agency. We're deceived into thinking it's an agency. They do this unspeakable thing. And do you know that every 90 days they add over $1 trillion to the national debt? Every 90 days. So that's like getting 4,000 credit cards and going out and maxing them all out when you have no job. That means you have no intention of paying them, right? What does that mean? You're printing money because it's worthless. Because in previous administrations, you wouldn't just keep printing money because you'd know at some point that debt's going to come due. And nobody's going to pay the national debt. Nobody has any intention of paying the national debt. And the Federal Reserve is at the heart of that. And of course, everybody knows you go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve. There's two, huge economic events. One, the creation of the Federal Reserve, and the other one that went off the gold standard. And people, I'm sure they said, I'm not giving up my gold. Who said, yeah, I'm not giving up my guns. Really? Yeah, because how are they going to do it? They're not going to show up at your door with a tank and have a big showdown like Ruby Ridge. It ain't going to happen that way. You're going to be taken off to jail because, you did something else, or they found another way to come for you. That's how they're going to do it. I mean, the ATF just went. Did you see that bizarre story? Went to arrest the guy running the Clinton airport in Arkansas?
Yeah.
Shoot out with the ATF, and he's dead. That guy. What happened there? Well, we don't even have time to look. But the point is that something that I'm sure you know about, that our bank deposits are not insured. They only have enough money to cover 60% of the bank deposits in America. That's not a very good insurance policy. But that's the insurance policy that we've been sold. We've been told that that's what's protecting our money in the past. It's not protecting our money. And now they've taken away, as of now this month, they've taken away the protections that they put in place after the 2008 financial collapse for the banks. They've taken that away. They're not going to pay for your failures anymore. Why? Well, a cynical person would say, maybe a realistic person would say, it was because they weren't willing to let the banks fail in 2008, but they're willing to let them fail now. Why? Because they have no intention of standing by the dollar. Because they have a new system that they want to bring in. That's very obvious. And the Federal Reserve, sir, obviously you asked that because you know that it's not a federal agency, and most of us believe it is. Sir.
I'm curious, as far as the political atmosphere, I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in our political candidates. Trump, of course, I have a little bit more faith in, but do you see a solution? And now that the AI, the cat is out of the box, is there a solution for besides just turning off our cell phones and hunkering down? What do you see?
So General Flynn always says local action, national impact, right? And there's a lot of things that you can do locally that can affect people. Like, you come and say, well, should the U.S., dissolve the UN? Or should we, remove ourselves from the UN? How are you going to make that happen? You can't make that happen on your own. But you can affect what happens with the ranches and the beef industry in Texas. You can use your state's rights. You can protect your own vote in the state of Texas. You can protect your own children and what's happening in your own schools. I mean, if you know, how many people in this room know what a 391 commission is? 2 people. 391, I believe I'm saying it right, but a 391 commission in the state of Texas is when the county gets together, you set up a commission, and if you pass a ruling with a majority vote, the state of Texas is bound by your decision. They did it in Uvalde. Before the school attack, Uvalde had an influx of illegal immigrants. The city was drowning. They had established a 391 commission. They voted for the state of Texas to provide them X number of $1 billion. I can't remember, it was 3, 4, 5 or something like that. And to cope with the influx of illegal immigrants in their community. And the state of Texas is now bound by the 391 commission. So what I would say is there's a spiritual component to this situation that we're in. You can see it. I don't know what happened to the music industry, because if you turn on any popular music thing at any time, it is replete with satanic imagery. I'm not making that up. You can look it up for yourself. I literally saw Doja Cat. I didn't know what Doja Cat was. I saw this trending on my Twitter feed, on my X feed, the one day said, what's Doja Cat? You know, because that feed is designed to draw you in, like the notifications. And I clicked on it, and I watched. Doja Cat's new video had come out. And it was Doja Cat and the guy that she performs with. She's a very famous, very multi-millionaire singer. She was dressed completely in a red bodysuit, like the devil with satanic horns, demon eyes, and the demon tongue, and all this, and a tail. And her and this man were around this pod that was hanging from the ceiling. It was on the sort of, kind of like an umbilical, like a big thick umbilical cord, and it was a pod like a remote womb, and there was a demon baby in the pod, and they're being very explicitly sexual around this demonic child that's obviously meant to symbolize their child. And in the video, the demon child is born. This was trending on Twitter. This was #1 in the United States. This is what your children are watching. This is what they're watching. There's a famous guy, my son would be rolling his eyes at me right now, but because he told me about this. This guy put human blood in a sneaker, in the heel of a sneaker. It had a bubble in it, and with human blood inside. And this guy is a Satanist, this performer. And those were limited edition shoes that people were paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for to own these satanic shoes. So we know we're in a spiritual war. We can see the spiritual war around us. If you are rewording, if you're taking pedophiles and you're creating that to be minor attractive persons, and you're advocating on behalf of a man who just raped a child or a baby rather than the baby, we are now in a very dark place. And that's what I mean about when I say to you, I don't want to be unsatisfying when I say to you, some of this it's in God's hands, it's not in our hands. The whole solution is not in our hands. Our job is to live with honor and integrity and dignity, and to do everything we can to stand up for that. It is not okay to say my family's good, my ranch is doing well, my business is great. It's not my fault that children are being raped for money in the state of Texas in every direction around me day and night. I can't do anything about that. Actually, you can. You can do something about that. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to make your voice heard. You're supposed to stand up for what you believe in. You are supposed to stand up and protect God's creation. Whether that is the cattle on your farm. This is really important that I do want to make sure that I share with you. There's a gentleman that I know pretty well now. I've known him for a number of years. His job for U.S. intelligence was to infiltrate what he calls the global cult. So those of you who think it's not real, I know a guy who's been 2.5 years training underground to do this job. To infiltrate something that supposedly doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory. I don't think so. So his job, he was assigned to the Middle East faction at the United Nations of the global cult. Middle East faction. So when you think we're at war with Islam, not all of us are at war with Islam, right? Or Islamic terrorism, Islamic extremism, I don't mean Islam. But, so not all of us. Because here, in the middle of the war on terror, here you got a guy who's infiltrating the Middle East faction of the global cult. And I asked him once, because I was doing a lot of work in Mexico and a lot of work with cartels, and I was consumed by violence. Very dark place to live in when you're working on these kind of stories. And I had to understand. I saw things of such unspeakable evil. I had to understand why. And when you work in the counter-traffic area, which is the primary thing that America's Future does, and I'm very deeply involved in that, and I'm hoping to do a series of my show on trafficking. When you work in that space, it's very hard to understand. Lindsay's not here now, I can say, when you've literally got people that have figured out how to take a baby or a toddler or a child, and they cut certain veins because they want what's called a blood show when they rape that child, and they want them to bleed to death in a fantastic array. And they post that online, or when you have hundreds of people that will dial in to participate in the live torture and murder of children. This is happening every day and night on the dark web.
How about adrenochrome?
And there's the adrenochrome part of it, which is not a conspiracy theory. Dr. Young is here, he can tell you when people are terrified and they're in an extreme state of fear. They release something from their adrenal glands called adrenochrome. I mean, it's a real thing. And I have actually, some of the counter-trafficking people I've worked with have a young girl who was trafficked so many times. In fact, eventually to a cartel hitman who put razor blades in her fake nails and made her execute the people he was assigned to kill. And how he got her to do it in the beginning was that she was, I think, 17 at the time, 16. How he got her to do it was that she gave her a certain amount of time. He lured them in to have sex, and he gave her a certain amount of time to kill them. If she didn't kill them in that amount of time, he would come in the room and he would kill them. But he would do it in the most horrific way. He would torture them to death, and all the while that he was torturing them, he would tell her, "You did this. See, you made him suffer." And with the first one, he tied her naked to the bed, chained her to the bed with her legs spread open. He beheaded the guy after he tortured him, put their head between her legs, and she was instructed to peel the skin and everything off his skull until there was only bone. And that's the kind of thing. This girl had killed 64 people by the time she was 20 years old. 64 people she killed for. Now she actually escaped from another person who trafficked her years earlier, got to a church where she was trafficked by the youth pastor in her church. There was a satanic cell under her church, and she was taken back into trafficking. And this girl at one point, she described in her testimony being taken to a place where she was hooked up to machines, and on the one hand, they tortured her, they did terrible things, so she passed out a lot of the time, but she remembers them putting blood in her and taking blood out. She did not know what adrenochrome was, never heard of it, but she did not know what they were actually doing. But this couple who I know who have been in counter trafficking since the early 90s have many cases like this. So this is not a fantasy. I'm not talking about it as a fantasy. I'm talking about it as a reality. So when you see this is what I said to my friend who infiltrated the cult. I said, I need to understand the violence. I have to understand this. And he said, I said, especially when it comes to the children and the babies, And he said to me, "You're looking at it the wrong way. It's not about hurting the child. It's not about hurting the baby." He said, "We are created in the image of God. And when we are born, there is no one closer to God. No one closer to God than a child when it's born. So the reason the younger the child matters is because the closer you are to God, you are never closer to God than in that moment when you are born. And any pain and suffering that can be inflicted upon that creation is a victory over God. So, I mean, what does the devil want? He wants the victory over God. He knows, the devil knows that he cannot truly defeat God. I mean, I sound like I know what I'm talking about when I say that, but I think you all know I'm not some religious crazy. I mean, look at it. If God is real and God is all powerful, God is going to win. God will prevail. Good will prevail over evil. But what is Satan trying to do in this realm? He's trying to inflict the greatest pain and suffering on God that he can. And so the more he can make God's creation suffer. I stayed away from God for most of my life because I was very angry with God. I spent a lot of my time confronting reality. And human suffering was a very big part of that. And I could not abide it. It broke my heart. It still does today. I have to steel myself at Christmas not to let it break me for all those kids who are going, to not have a Christmas. And the pain they will have just breaks me. And I realized a few years ago that God was showing me his pain. It wasn't my pain. What I was witnessing and experiencing was a fraction of the pain that God feels when his children suffer. And he gave us free will so we could decide. And who doesn't give you free will? Satan does not give you free will. So that dividing line between good and evil, the dividing line between God and Satan is free will. That's why freedom has to be absolute. Freedom and free will has to be absolute. Every principle has to be absolute. You can't pick up a principle when you feel like it and put it down when it's going to cost you too much. You have to stand by it every single moment, otherwise it's meaningless. It's just a bumper sticker. So what that is really about is this is not really our war. It's not really for us. This is what is at the heart of war. Look what that psychiatrist said. They're trying to separate you from your true self as you were created and make you believe that you can change your gender. You can't. So why is he doing that? Because this is a war on God. He wants you to not choose him. For one reason or another, he wants you not to choose him. And the greater pain and suffering that they can inflict on God's creations, the greater the victory against God. And so we know there's a spiritual component to this battle. You can feel it. You can feel it all around you. You see it all around you. You don't have to take my word for it. I see you nodding because you already know this to be true. Right? And so what you can do is you cannot sit by and say, it's okay that Erickson, who has the contract to store child pornography in 152 countries, runs our technology, and the Habsburg monarchy, who own Erickson, are multi-billionaires. It's not okay. You can't change that. Why do we never do anything about it? Because Ericsson moves all of our communications. They own those systems, which means they move our classified communications, which means they know everything. So they have all that information that they need to use against you to control you. What does everybody say? You go to Washington and they take control of you. If they can't do it at a party by getting you drunk, and they can't do it with a hooker, and they can't do it with a corrupt money deal or making you rich with a legitimate deal, if they can't control you like that, they'll find another way. And what is the key to that? Information. What do I know about you? Do you have a thing for dwarf porn? Are you cheating on your wife? Do you have? So I want to answer this. I want to give you one thing to end this answer. My son is 15 years old. He watches someone go Viking Tom. I probably got that the wrong way around to be like, oh, you're just. Okay, this guy on YouTube is an influencer. What does he do? He does analyses of things, and they're pretty interesting. He did this analysis of a social media influencer who had just been kicked off Twitter. That was one of the worst hours of my life listening to that. This is a man who literally talked on Twitter with other pedophiles about all the things that they wanted to do and did do and were doing to children and to babies, and by the way, to animals as well. Because bestiality and pedophilia now go hand in hand. And it may be horrific to you, and you may think, "Ooh, why is she talking about that?" Let me tell you, it's normal to our kids. It is now normal to our kids. They talk about it all the time. It is raised all across social media. And when you read this feed and you listen to this young YouTuber doing this breakdown, on the one hand, it gave me some hope, because here is someone in my son's orbit who is lifting the veil, and my son is looking at this and saying, this guy is a, are you listening to see what these people are doing? They were doing it on Twitter. Literally doing it on Twitter, this guy. I mean, posting things like, my mom got a new dog today, I could hardly contain myself, and then, oh yeah. I mean, this is real. This is real, and it is becoming normal. And you know why it's becoming normal? Because you're looking the other way. You don't want to deal with it, and you don't want to know. And you think, well, I'm old, I don't care about technology, I don't really use technology, I just need Facebook to see my grandkids occasionally. You're slitting your own throat. Somebody else on this side had a question. Here.
No, I just had your Ecclesiastes verse.
You what?
I had your Ecclesiastes verse.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want me to read it?
This very brave lady here, by the way. If you're looking for want to know how to help, this woman and the woman she works with, the women that she works with, they do God's work. They have been responsible for rescuing more trafficking victims in the state of Texas than any other organization. There's two. Yeah, he's got two. No, the other one, no bueno? Okay. Shepherd's Watch is where you gotta go. I mean, I'm not kidding you, okay? They can tell you how many brothels there are within X miles of Fredericksburg, how many adverts there were for sex. They're doing amazing, amazing work, and these are all ordinary women, mothers, grandmothers, that they get nothing, they're not rich, they don't have any money of their own, they don't get paid anything most of the time, they get nothing. And they go in and they save kids. I have learned so much about trafficking because of these women. And they are quiet, they ask for nothing, and they are working with DPS, Texas DPS, and with the Texas Rangers, and with all of our law enforcement. They just did the biggest trafficking bust in the history of the state of Texas. And it was all based on their... What I'm trying to say to you, maybe I'm not doing it in a very direct way, but what I'm trying to say to you is, my personal belief for me, my job is to make sure that I live the way we are supposed to live, because otherwise the earth is not going to be worth saving. And if we allow children to be raped for money and tortured to death, the average amount of time a child survives once they're trafficked is 2 years. I think that's merciful. I think it's merciful, because I can tell you about young girls, like one who was sold to ISIS that I interviewed. I mean, the 4th time she was sold as a sex slave, they put her in the headquarters of ISIS in Mosul. She was chained to a bed for almost 2 years. She was kept in a dark room. Every couple of weeks or so, they might unchain one arm for her to eat. She was naked the entire time. She never wore clothes. And every member of ISIS that came through that building that wanted to rape her did. 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day, every single day. Day after day, after day, after day, after day, after day. I mean, just imagine that. Take 5 times a day for 2 years. See how many times you were raped. I meet people like this all the time. These are not exceptions. This is not happening to a small number of people. We are now in the midst of a government-sponsored trafficking program. This is sexual slavery. We are looking, and modern slavery is it's the largest form of slavery that has ever existed in our lifetimes. And most of it is, the center of it is Texas. It's one of the worst in the nation. You can do everything right here. And you can raise your hand and say, I am not going to live with this 1 minute longer. I'm not going to do it. Because taking a 3-4-year-old child and putting them on puberty blockers before they even reach puberty is also torture. These children, if you read their stories, there's an amazing girl, her name is Chloe. They torture these children. Do you remember the Navy SEAL? My husband was so happy when this Navy SEAL came out and said he was transgender, because he got to laugh at he's an Army guy, and he got to laugh at every single Navy SEAL he knew and rub their face in it. Because big burly Navy SEAL, right? I like to dress in women's clothing. That guy who covered his story when he came out several years later and said it was the worst thing that he'd ever done, that he destroyed his whole life. It was suicidal as a result. Because he wasn't really a woman. He needed help. He needed to find his true self. He needed to be reconnected to his true self, and he didn't need people to reinforce the mass delusion at his own cost. Now, they may not be giving boys fake breasts, but you know what they are doing? They're chopping off the breasts of young girls, and they don't grow back. Do they?
No.
No. Any other questions? Yes.
About 7.5 months to go to the election, and the thing that's really concerning me, and the only person, well, you kind of touched on it earlier, the only person that's really brought this up that I'm aware of is Trump. And they've done everything in the world to put Trump down. And they're running out of options to build momentum. And I didn't think that Biden would make it this small second, and apparently they want to steal money. What do you think the chances are that they're going to try to assassinate us?
So that would fit into the category of the unknowable, right?
Can you repeat the question for us?
Okay, so the question was, what are the chances that they're going to try to assassinate Trump? They've already tried to assassinate Trump in many different ways. You know, I mean, $464 million fine judgment against them is just, I mean, nobody's ever heard of that. There's not even something that comes close to it. Now, the appeals judge, who is not a nice guy, he reduced that down to 175, I think, which is like it's like a 60% reduction, just over 60% reduction in the fine. And the guy, I mean, excoriated Trump in the court. Like, he wasn't doing it because he liked Trump. He was doing it because he knew you couldn't uphold that judgment. I mean, there's nothing like it ever happened in the history of this country. So, I would say to you, like, I'm just a journalist, so I don't have any, brand insight, and I'm not a prophet. When they would ask me on CBS, what do you think is going to happen in the war? I'd be like, oh, look at my crystal ball. But what you're really asking is, it comes back to this. Yes, there is a rising level of desperation. My husband and I argue about this at both, because he, having worked in special operations and clandestine activities, and then he sees a lot of things that we don't see, that I don't see. For example, we are in an undeclared war, right? This is unrestricted warfare. You're not going to see the tanks rolling down the streets or the jets overhead, because they can't win that way. So, and also, our domestic enemies want to get away with what they're doing, right? The traitors, they want to get away with it, so they don't want you to see it in plain view. They want to come through the back door. So, what you are really asking is, what are the chances that they let him get into the White House? Whether they have to put him in prison, whether they have to kill him, whether they have to, whatever it happens, whatever it is, I would say the chances are small. I mean, barring a miracle, they lose everything if he gets it.
Yeah.
They lose it all. Like, there's no going back. There's no going back for them. They can't undo what they've done. I mean, they carried out a seditious conspiracy. They used Five Eyes intelligence allies, foreign nations, to spy on a presidential candidate and then a president. They used Russian intelligence, a foreign adversary. They used Russian intelligence to build a false case. It's a conspiracy, an actual legal conspiracy, to undermine a legally elected president. They did it from the head of counterintelligence at the FBI all the way to the CIA, to the State Department. They were all involved. If they are held to account, it's over. I mean, it's literally over. So are they going to allow that to happen? No, but they're like a rabid dog that's in a corner right now. Look at the speed that things are happening. On the one hand, are they putting as much in place and moving this fast because they're worried and they're under pressure? Probably, because look how deceptive they've been for a very long time. So in information warfare, what did you have when Trump took office? It was Russia this, Russia that, Magnitsky meeting, Trump towers. I mean, you couldn't see the forest for the trees, right? That's tactical ambiguity increasing. So it becomes harder and harder to see what the truth is. You think you can see it, and then they throw this at you, and then they throw that at you, and it's very hard to know. What is happening now? Ambiguity is decreasing. We are now seeing people for who they really are. We now know, if you paid attention and took the time to look at the transcripts, we now know that when John Brennan was interviewed under oath about Russia, he said the opposite to what he said in public. So now these people have been exposed. We now know that Pfizer didn't actually make the vaccine. It was made by the Department of Defense. We now know that Pfizer had all the data on how it was sterilizing women, destroying their menstrual cycles, fatal to pregnant women, and they put it out anyway. We know this. No one in this administration is going to hold any of those people to account. No one. So, if Trump were to come in, if that life raft were to sail down this river, it's the end for them. It has to be. Because if it doesn't end them, it's going to end Trump. And surely when he's got the power, he's not going to let that happen. So I would say, in theory, the chances are very high that they will do whatever it takes, including dropping a nuclear bomb, if that's what it takes.
Next year, they're really, really late.
President Biden said there's a backward, everybody's in their diets.
They just made, what, a year ago, they made it mandatory for babies to have the COVID vaccine. They will do anything. They will literally do anything.
But Biden said that they're going to everything in his power so that Trump will never be that.
Read the Rolling Stone magazine article that just came out about the superstructure, this massive infrastructure that Biden has built to make sure that Trump doesn't steal the election.
Right.
Oh, your question.
Yes. And I'm sure a lot of people in the here are going to want to know, why are we still paying for the federal income tax? Because I feel like it's funding sex trafficking when I do that.
Because you are.
Exactly.
You're not just funding sex trafficking, we're funding our own demise. I mean, we have ideologicals. The question is, why are we still funding all of this through our federal income taxes? Because we have cowards in power in the state of Texas. And I know a lot of people don't like Ken Paxton, and I know he's had a dodgy history, but Ken Paxton is right now the only person, for better or worse, you got what you got, he's the only one who's actually doing anything. I can't speak to exactly what it is, but he doesn't have to do it. So he just got pornography in the state of Pornhub in the state of Texas, right?
Yes.
So you might think, well, that's a bit radical and extreme. You know, these religious zealots, I wish they would just back off and leave us alone. Well, let me explain to you why that matters. Because not only are people being trafficked on Pornhub on a colossal scale, because technology took trafficking, again, from pickpocketing to global credit card fraud on a nuclear factor. Pornography is being used by traffickers as training videos for kids. It's much easier to get a young child to do what you want them to do to service your client if they know what you're talking about. And I'm not kidding you. There was that incident in South Texas where a 6-year-old boy pulled a 6-year-old girl off her chair in the classroom and forced her to give him oral sex. And another 6-year-old boy filmed it on a school iPad. Yeah, and when that was exposed, now that kid, the little girl who was abused, didn't have a mother, she's being raised by an aunt, whatever, the Hispanic family, they were lied to at school, they weren't told for days, and when they eventually went on Facebook and went public because the school was treating them like trash, the school called in the FBI to protect them against the extremists, violent extremists of these families that were rallying to defend this young girl. I mean, they went after the family. They went after the family instead of protecting that child. Now, how did the kid know to film it? How did that kid know what that was? He was trained. He was trained using pornography. He'd seen it before. He knew what it was. So pornography is not just for you at home to enjoy. It is, you may not, every person who watches pornography or child pornography may not be a pedophile, but I can promise you that what happens, every child that's in those videos will end up dead. And it won't be an easy death. I asked the doctor once, when you're raped to death, what do you die of? It's a simple question, right? We never ask. If young blood keeps you alive, how much do you need? Where do you get it from? It's more powerful the younger you are. the baby's blood better than a teenager? All those people who want eternal youth who are using blood and blood products since they're young? Do you care where it comes from? So when you ask that question, right? How do you die? You bleed to death. It's not equivalent. Slow bleed. So that's happening all around you. It's happening right now. I can promise you that. Texas Rangers busted 2 years ago. They busted a trafficking ring in Texas where pregnant women were being taken to a shop behind the gas station, and they were being raped for 8 hours a day to pay off their debt to the cartels. These people will tell you they care so much about migrants, we have to open the border to the world, but you don't care that 85,000 children, unaccompanied minors that came in the 2021-22 fiscal year have disappeared? Yes.
According to Jason Jones, the last time I saw you, that number was true.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
For reality.
And Jason Jones is another person you can follow if you're interested. The Texas Department of Public Safety, who ran the Cross-Border Operations Center in 2014 and 15. And I'm working on something right now, by the way. I have documents detailing Biden's visit to Guatemala in 2014, where he announced in a meeting with the heads of state of Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Honduras that the border was now open for unaccompanied minors. That if you send your unaccompanied minors to America, they would be given instant citizenship, and they could bring other family members afterwards through chain migration. He went there in 2014 and said it publicly. There's photographs of him in the meeting, there's quotes, there's video. 2014, he said, bring us your unaccompanied minors. And there has been hundreds of thousands that have gone missing. Look at Tara Rodas, who's an amazing whistleblower, still works for the federal government in the Office of the Inspector General.
Yes.
This woman is bringing in other whistleblowers. She's a Democrat. She went and volunteered to go down and help the Biden administration when they sent out an old call for, because there's so many, since they opened the border, they need more hands on the federal government. She thought she was going to be reading in Spanish, putting kids to bed while they waited for their parents to pick them up. Instead, she found they had 15-year-old boys in diapers because they've been raped so many times. And they're sending them to one address in Texas, 200 kids. 200 kids to one address in Texas. I don't think so. Oh, wait, we've got sponsors that are members of MS-13 that are taking 20, 30, 40 kids. What is an MS-13 gang member need with 40 kids? Where do they go? We don't know. We don't know. I know where they go. We all know where they go. And it's not a good place. We have another woman, Sylvia Ramos, who's been doing this. She started in El Salvador 20-something years ago. She's been working in Florida for the last 15 years. She's picking up girls and kids on the streets of Florida who are committing petty crime so that the police will pick them up and deport them because they are tired of being raped and abused by their sponsors. The Department of Homeland Security just put forward a bill to remove all the restrictions on people who can volunteer as sponsors. No vetting. They want no. Why does the Department of Homeland Security want no vetting for people who you're giving God's children to them?
They're part of the sex trafficking. They are condoning.
They're not just condoning it, they're facilitating it as they do. And back to your question, and we're paying for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chris is standing up, which I think is my cue.